The room was alive with quiet murmurs, the low hum of conversation punctuated by the soft clink of a distant glass. Ambassador Lydia Williams, a woman known for her diplomatic prowess and calm demeanor, sat at the head of the table, her fingers lightly tapping the surface in rhythm with her thoughts. She had just arrived on Arisith, the capital planet of the ancient and enigmatic Arisith species, a race far older and more technologically advanced than humanity. This meeting had been years in the making, the culmination of an intricate web of diplomatic overtures, cautious conversations, and tentative trust. For Earth, this was a momentous occasion, a turning point that could usher in an era of unprecedented cooperation with the galaxy's most elusive civilization. Lydia was ready for the challenge. As the lead negotiator for Earth's interests, she had grown accustomed to navigating the delicate balance of alien politics. The Arisith were notorious for their reticence, their aversion to outside interference, and their cryptic ways. But Lydia had a reputation for getting things done, for breaking through barriers that seemed insurmountable to others. The Arisith delegation, seated across from her, was an imposing sight. Tall, with elongated faces and shimmering skin that reflected the light in strange, beautiful patterns, they appeared almost ethereal. Their language, lilting and melodic, was composed of both verbal and visual cues, a language so complex that even the most gifted human linguists had struggled to fully comprehend it. "I trust your journey to our world has been comfortable, Ambassador Williams," came the voice of Vassyl, the lead negotiator for the Arisith. His eyes, impossibly deep, seemed to pierce through Lydia, probing her very soul as though measuring her worthiness for this exchange. "Comfortable and enlightening, Vassyl," Lydia replied smoothly, her smile unwavering. She had studied their culture for years, learning the subtleties of their complex social structures and the nuances of their delicate, indirect speech. "Your planet is as beautiful as the stories suggest." The room quieted, and the rest of the Arisith delegation nodded in approval. The ice had been broken. Lydia's next words, carefully chosen, would steer the conversation to its most important point. "As you know," Lydia continued, her voice steady, "Earth has extended an offer of cooperation, an exchange of knowledge, trade, and security. Our goal is simple: to ensure peace and mutual prosperity." Vassyl tilted his head slightly, a gesture Lydia had come to understand as a sign of deep contemplation. For a moment he said nothing, his long fingers steepling together in front of him. "The Arisith have always valued knowledge, Ambassador. We have watched your species for some time, seen your rapid advancement. But the question remains, what does Earth seek from the stars?" Vassyl's voice was soft, yet there was an underlying sharpness to it. "What is your true purpose in seeking out the Arisith?" Lydia met his gaze, her expression unflinching. "Our purpose is to learn, to grow, to protect ourselves from the dangers that lurk beyond our understanding." Vassyl studied her carefully. His silence felt heavy, almost oppressive, as though he were considering whether or not to continue this conversation. Lydia, feeling the weight of his scrutiny, knew she had to be patient. The Arisith had a unique approach to diplomacy, one that valued quiet moments of reflection as much as it did hard facts. She allowed the silence to linger, waiting for him to speak again. "Very well," Vassyl finally said, his voice low and deliberate. "We shall consider your offer, Ambassador. But there is something you must understand. The Arisith do not form alliances lightly. Trust is earned over centuries, not in a single conversation." Lydia nodded, grateful for the clarity. "And Earth is willing to earn that trust, slowly if necessary." As the conversation continued, Lydia's attention remained focused on Vassyl's every word. But something nagged at the back of her mind. something she couldn't quite place. The Arisith were being unusually distant, even for them, and while their outward expressions seemed to indicate a willingness to move forward, Lydia couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Her instincts, honed over years of diplomatic service, told her that this was no ordinary negotiation. There was a hidden tension in the air, an undercurrent of fear or uncertainty that even the Arisith couldn't mask completely. As the meeting came to a close, Lydia stood, her mind racing. She had been briefed on the importance of this summit, but there was something she hadn't been told, something she needed to understand before it was too late. Vassyl's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Ambassador Williams, there is something I would like to show you, if you are willing." The invitation was not one Lydia could refuse. Despite the unease gnawing at her, she had to follow through. She had made a promise to Earth, and she intended to keep it. The Arisith Palace was an architectural marvel, elegant, flowing, and almost otherworldly in its design. The walls were covered in intricate patterns that shifted and pulsed with light, as though the building itself were alive. Lydia followed Vassyl through winding corridors, her footsteps muffled on the soft, silken floor. They arrived at a room deep within the palace, a chamber that seemed to be carved from the very rock of the planet itself. In the center of the room was a large, spherical object, glowing with an eerie, greenish light. It was a piece of technology unlike anything Lydia had ever seen, too advanced, too alien for her to comprehend at a glance. "This," Vassyl said, his voice reverberating slightly, "is the heart of the Arisith. It contains the knowledge of our people, the essence of our history and our power. It has guided us for millennia." Lydia stepped closer, her curiosity piqued despite the strange chill that ran down her spine. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Vassyl's gaze softened, though his expression remained unreadable. "It is the culmination of our civilization. It has given us all that we have, the wisdom to navigate the stars, the ability to shape reality itself." Lydia's heart quickened as she felt the pull of the artifact. She had read about Arisith technology, but this was something beyond her wildest imagination. There was an undeniable power emanating from it, a force that felt both comforting and terrifying. Before she could ask another question, a sharp noise broke through the air. An alarm, a sudden shrill sound that echoed through the chamber. Vassyl's expression darkened in an instant, and he turned toward the door. "Ambassador, you must leave," he said urgently, his voice now strained. "The situation has changed. I cannot explain further, but you must leave now." Lydia's mind raced. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. The calm, measured Arisith were no longer the stoic diplomats she had come to know. There was fear in their eyes now, and fear was never a good sign. Before she could react, an explosion shook the building. The lights flickered, and the walls trembled. Vassyl grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the exit. "We are under attack," he said, his voice low and urgent. "You must go." In the chaos that followed, Lydia was escorted to a secure room deep within the palace, far from the danger. Vassyl and the other Arisith officials seemed to be on edge, moving quickly and purposefully. They spoke in hushed tones, too quickly for Lydia to understand. Her mind raced. Who could be attacking the Arisith, and why? It was then that she saw it, a message on the large hollow screen in the corner of the room. The message was short and direct, a simple image that sent a shock through her body. "Dynamoli have found us. The time has come." Before Lydia could process the meaning of the message, she felt a sharp pain in her chest. Her vision blurred, and the world around her began to spin. She collapsed to her knees, gasping for breath. Vassyl's face appeared before her, his expression one of profound sorrow. "I am sorry, Ambassador. I did not wish for this to happen." The last thing Lydia remembered before her world went dark was Vassyl's voice, filled with regret. "You were never meant to see this. Let me know if you'd like to continue the story or need further adjustments." Lydia awoke with a start, her heart pounding in her chest as she gasped for air. The room around her was dim, the walls glowing faintly with an eerie green light that flickered as though alive. She could feel the weight of her body against a soft, unfamiliar surface, the sheets cool beneath her, but her head swam with confusion. The last thing she remembered was the explosion, the deafening sound that rattled the Arisith palace and sent her stumbling. Then, nothing. Just the sensation of being pulled down into darkness. "Ambassador Williams," a voice soft but urgent called her name. Lydia blinked rapidly, her vision clearing as she focused on the figure standing beside her bed. Vassyl. His expression was grave, his normally composed features drawn with worry. He looked more like the man she had met upon first arriving on Arisith, stoic and calm, but the tension in his posture was unmistakable. His eyes glinted with something deeper, a fear that he was trying to hide, though it was failing. "You're awake," he murmured, more to himself than to her. Lydia slowly sat up, her body protesting as though waking from a long, heavy sleep. She rubbed her temples, trying to clear the fog in her mind. "What happened? Where am I?" Vassyl didn't answer immediately. His gaze flickered to the door, then back to her, as though he was weighing his words carefully. "You are in a safe place. For now. The attack on the palace was sudden. We did not anticipate it." Lydia frowned. An attack? She remembered the explosion, the panic that had followed, but the details were hazy, lost in the confusion of that moment. "The palace is under lockdown," Vassyl continued, his tone hardening. "We have sealed ourselves in, but I cannot say for how long. We are not alone here, Ambassador." Lydia's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean? Who is attacking you?" Vassyl hesitated, his usual composure cracking just enough for Lydia to see a flicker of something dark in his eyes. He took a breath, steadying himself before he spoke again. "I fear you may have learned something you were never meant to know." Lydia's pulse quickened as she searched his face for answers. "What are you talking about? What did I see?" Vassyl stepped back slightly, looking uneasy, as if struggling to reconcile what he had to say. "The heart of the Arisith, the object you saw earlier, has been in our possession for millennia. It holds the essence of our civilization, our history, and most importantly, our power. But there are forces outside of our control that covet that power." Lydia's mind raced. She had felt something from the heart, a force, an overwhelming presence, both ancient and vast, but it had also felt dangerous, too dangerous to be in the hands of any one species. "What forces?" she asked, her voice sharp. Vassyl hesitated again, his gaze darkening. "I cannot tell you all of it, not yet. But there are other species, other civilizations that have learned of the heart's power, and they will stop at nothing to claim it, even if it means destroying everything in their path." The air in the room felt heavier now, the gravity of his words settling in. Lydia's mind raced, struggling to piece together the fragments of information. The attack, the urgency in Vassyl's tone. Everything seemed so calculated, so deliberate. "But why attack now?" she asked, her voice a whisper. "Why target your people? Why bring me into this?" Vassyl looked away for a moment, his shoulders sagging as though the weight of the situation had become too much. "Because you are human," he said, finally meeting her gaze again. "Your presence here, your people's curiosity, has drawn attention. The heart is not just an object of knowledge. It is an artifact of unimaginable power, one that can reshape the fabric of reality itself. And the forces that seek it, they have been watching for centuries. They knew we had invited you here. They knew the moment Earth's representatives stepped foot on Arisith, they would have an opportunity to strike." Lydia's mind reeled as the gravity of his words hit her. This wasn't just a diplomatic mission gone awry. This was something far larger, something far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Earth had unknowingly become a pawn in a much darker game, a game of power and ancient forces, one that stretched across the galaxy. "Who are these forces?" she asked, the question slipping from her lips before she could stop herself. Vassyl's face hardened, his jaw tightening as he glanced toward the door again. "I cannot name them all. Some of them are ancient enemies, beings of immense power that predate even the Arisith. Others are more recent, ruthless warlords and mercenaries who would stop at nothing to control the heart. All of them, however, share a single goal." Lydia felt a cold shiver crawl down her spine. For the first time in her life, she understood the true weight of her position. She wasn't just a diplomat anymore. She was part of a much larger, more dangerous equation. And her world, her very species, had just become a target. Vassyl's voice softened, almost as if he were speaking to himself. "We have kept the heart hidden from the universe for millennia, knowing that its discovery would bring nothing but destruction. But now—" His voice trailed off, and he looked at her with an intensity that sent a jolt through her. "Now you know its secret, and for that you must be protected." Lydia took a deep breath, her mind still racing to catch up with everything he had told her. "I need to speak to my people," she said firmly. "I need to contact Earth. They have to know what's happening here." Vassyl's face darkened, and for a moment it seemed as though he might argue. But then he simply nodded, his expression grim. "I understand, Ambassador, but I fear that it may already be too late for that." The weight of his words pressed on her chest, and she suddenly felt the immense isolation of her position. Earth had sent her here to foster peace, to create an alliance, but now she was caught in the middle of something far more sinister, something far beyond her ability to control. Before she could respond, a loud noise echoed from the hallway outside, a deep, resonating thud followed by the unmistakable sound of boots marching in unison. Lydia's heart skipped a beat. Someone or something was coming. Vassyl's eyes widened. "They've found us." With swift precision, he grabbed Lydia's arm, pulling her to her feet. "You must come with me," he urged, his voice urgent. "Now!" Lydia didn't have time to protest. She let him guide her through the labyrinth of hallways, her mind still reeling from the enormity of what was happening. They moved quickly, their footsteps muffled by the thick, padded floors of the palace, but the sounds outside grew louder, closer. The door to their left opened abruptly, and a figure stepped into the hallway, cloaked in shadow. It was an Arisith soldier, but his face was grim and his posture tense. He nodded once to Vassyl and then turned to Lydia. "You must come with us, Ambassador," he said, his voice low and commanding. Vassyl's grip on Lydia's arm tightened. "Where are you taking her?" The soldier's gaze flicked to Vassyl. "To the underground vault. It is the only safe place left." As they moved deeper into the heart of the palace, the air grew colder, and the dim lights seemed to flicker more erratically. Lydia's mind raced. She had never imagined that a diplomatic mission would devolve into a life or math struggle so quickly. Everything she had known about diplomacy, about her work, felt insignificant now, a mere speck in the larger galactic struggle unfolding before her. But the discovery of the heart had changed everything, and there was no going back now. The stone corridors of the Arisith palace grew narrower as Lydia was led deeper into the heart of the structure. Each step she took seemed to echo louder, reverberating against the cool, smooth surfaces of the ancient walls. The air felt denser now, tinged with an almost tangible sense of urgency, as though time was slipping away with each passing moment. Vassyl, who had been her guide since the very beginning of her diplomatic mission, remained silent beside her. His usual calm demeanor had shattered, replaced by a focused intensity that Lydia hadn't seen in him before. His eyes were alert, his sharp gaze darting from shadow to shadow, his every movement taut with tension. The Arisith soldier who had joined them remained at the front of their group, his uniform pristine but his expression grim. He didn't speak, but Lydia could feel his presence like an unspoken warning, a constant reminder that they were not alone in this palace and that danger was closing in.
"How much farther?"
Lydia finally asked, her voice low and laced with growing frustration. The silence had become unbearable, and her mind was buzzing with 1,000 questions. She had barely absorbed the information Vassyl had given her about the heart, and now they were rushing through corridors, hiding from a threat she didn't fully understand. She needed answers. "Not far," Vassyl responded, his tone clipped, betraying his own anxiety. "The vault is beneath the palace. It is the only place where the heart can be protected." Lydia's brow furrowed. "What do you mean, protected?" she asked, trying to piece together the fragments of information she had learned. "What is so dangerous about it?" Vassyl glanced at her, his eyes shadowed with sorrow. "The heart is not just a relic, it is a force, a power that in the wrong hands could reshape the entire galaxy." He paused as though weighing whether to continue. "For centuries we have kept it hidden, but the forces that now seek it will stop at nothing to claim it. And if they succeed, the consequences will be catastrophic." The minstrel oversight had struck the Dayu catalog publicly 6 times over. Catastrophic. Lydia absorbed his words, feeling the weight of them settle over her like a cloak. She had been trained in diplomacy, in negotiations, in the art of maintaining peace. But she had never imagined that peace could be so fragile, so easily shattered by the lust for power. She had been a part of something far larger than she had ever realized, something that transcended her role as a simple ambassador, as a negotiator for Earth. The heart wasn't just a piece of technology. It was an artifact of unimaginable importance, something that could alter the course of history itself. The soldier halted suddenly in front of a large, ornate door, its surface engraved with symbols that shimmered and shifted as though alive. The soft hum of energy emanated from the door, and Lydia instinctively took a step back, her senses alert. She had no idea what lay beyond, but something about the door felt wrong, dangerous, almost as if it were watching her. "This is it," the soldier said, his voice soft but commanding. He pressed a series of symbols on the wall next to the door, and with a low rumble, the heavy door slid open. The room beyond was vast and dimly lit, the air cool and dry, filled with a quiet, almost reverential stillness. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, and upon that pedestal lay the heart of the Arisith. Lydia's breath caught in her throat as she took in the sight of the artifact. It was unlike anything she had ever seen before, an orb of swirling energy, its surface constantly shifting and undulating as if it were alive. The light it emitted was faint but steady, casting strange shadows on the walls of the vault. The very air around it seemed to hum with power, vibrating in her bones, resonating with an energy that felt ancient, almost primordial. "It is beautiful," Lydia whispered, mesmerized by the swirling colors that danced within the heart. She could feel its pull, the magnetic force of it drawing her in, inviting her to come closer. But Vassyl's voice, low and urgent, broke through her reverie. "Do not approach it," he warned. "Not yet." Lydia blinked, shaking herself from the trance the heart had put her in. She hadn't realized how close she had gotten to it until Vassyl's warning. She stepped back, her heart pounding, as she tried to regain her composure. "What is it?" she asked again, her voice shaky. "What is the heart of the Arisith?" Vassyl stood a few steps away from her, his posture tense as he gazed at the artifact with a mixture of awe and fear. "The heart is the source of our power," he began, his voice heavy with the weight of history. "It is not simply an artifact. It is a living entity, an ancient consciousness that holds the accumulated knowledge and wisdom of our civilization." Lydia looked at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. "A living entity?" Vassyl nodded. "The heart communicates with us, guides us. It has shaped the very fabric of our society. It grants us knowledge and the ability to manipulate the energies of the universe itself, but it is not to be taken lightly. There are forces in the galaxy that would destroy everything to possess it, and the heart, it will not allow itself to be controlled." A shiver ran down Lydia's spine as she listened to Vassyl's words. She had come here as an ambassador, to negotiate peace and establish an alliance between Earth and the Arisith. But now she understood that this was far more than a simple diplomatic mission. She had been drawn into a galactic struggle, a battle for power that transcended species, that reached into the very core of the universe itself. She turned her gaze back to the heart, her mind swirling with questions. "What do you mean, it won't allow itself to be controlled?" Vassyl's eyes narrowed as though grappling with the complexity of the question. "The heart is alive in a way we cannot fully comprehend. It is tied to the fabric of the universe, to the flow of energy that binds all things together. It cannot be forced or dominated. If someone were to try to control it, they would unleash forces beyond their understanding, forces that could destroy entire civilizations." Lydia swallowed hard, her throat dry as she processed what he was saying. She had seen the power of the heart firsthand, felt its presence as though it were a living, breathing entity. The idea of controlling such power was both terrifying and intoxicating. It was no wonder that others would covet it, would do anything to possess it. But Lydia had learned one thing over the course of her career as an ambassador. There was always a balance. No matter how powerful an entity, there was always a way to negotiate, to find a middle ground. The trick was understanding the stakes, knowing what was worth fighting for, and what could be given up. "Then why bring me here?" Lydia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why let Earth become involved?" Vassyl's gaze softened for a moment, and for the first time Lydia saw the weight of centuries of responsibility on his shoulders. "Because the heart has chosen you," he said simply. "It recognized your presence the moment you arrived on Arisith. Your species, humanity, has something it needs, something only you can provide." Lydia took a step back, her mind reeling. "What do you mean?" "The heart is dying," Vassyl said, his voice filled with a deep sorrow. "The energy that powers it is beginning to fade. We've tried everything to sustain it, but nothing has worked. If the heart dies, so too will the Arisith. Our civilization will cease to exist, and the knowledge we have accumulated over millennia will be lost." Lydia's heart sank as the magnitude of his words hit her. The fate of an entire civilization rested on a dying artifact, a sentient power that had shaped the Arisith's world for eons. And yet it was fading, dying. The very thing that could bring peace and prosperity to the galaxy was on the brink of extinction. She took a slow breath, trying to steady herself. She had a duty to Earth, to her people, but now she realized she also had a duty to something far greater, something that transcended human ambition. She couldn't allow the heart to die. She couldn't allow the Arisith to vanish into history. "What can we do?" she asked, her voice steady now. Vassyl looked at her with a mixture of hope and fear. "There is one thing left, one last chance, but it will require the cooperation of your people. Only the combined energy of Earth and Arisith can revive the heart. Only through the fusion of our two civilizations will we have the power to restore it." Lydia nodded, her resolve hardening. She had no choice now. She was part of something larger than herself, something that could change the course of history. The discovery of the heart was only the beginning. And if she couldn't find a way to save it, then the galaxy, and all the life within it, might be doomed. Let me know if you'd like me to continue or modify anything.